Chapter 1. The Shape of a Mystery. There is a place in the Atlantic Ocean that does not appear on any official nautical chart. No government has drawn its borders. No international body has named it. And yet for decades, it has lived in the collective imagination as one of the most feared stretches of water on the planet. And we call it the Bermuda Triangle. Its rough boundaries stretch between Miami, Florida in the west, the island of Bermuda to the north, and San Juan, Puerto Rico to the south. It covers somewhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million square miles of open ocean, depending on who has drawn the lines. Within those shifting, unofficial borders, more than 50 ships and 20 aircraft have vanished over the past century, some with no distress call, some with no wreckage, some with no explanation that has ever fully satisfied the people looking for one. Tonight, we're going to move through that history slowly. We are going to visit the ships that went silent, the planes that disappeared mid-sentence, and the men and women who have spent their lives trying to understand what the ocean refuses to give back. We are going to sit with the uncertainty of it, because that uncertainty is exactly what makes this story worth telling. Some of these disappearances have rational explanations. Some, almost certainly, do not need a supernatural answer. But a few of them, even after scrutiny, leave a residue of genuine strangeness that is difficult to dismiss. Let us begin at the beginning. Chapter 2. Where the myth was born. The term Bermuda Triangle was first used in print in 1964 in a magazine called Argosy. A writer named Benson Gaddis used those two words to describe an area he claimed had swallowed ships and planes with unusual frequency. But the idea that the region was somehow dangerous had been circulating quietly for years before that, carried mostly by sailors who noticed that their compasses behaved strangely there, and by insurance adjusters who flagged the area as statistically unusual. It was a man named Charles Berlitz who turned a regional curiosity into a global phenomenon. His 1974 book, simply titled The Bermuda Triangle, sold over 20 million copies and was translated into more than 30 languages. Berlitz wove together every disappearance, every strange event, every fringe theory he could find into a single, breathless narrative. He suggested alien abduction. He raised the legend of Atlantis. He proposed that some unknown energy source beneath the ocean floor was pulling vessels downward. The book was, to put it gently, not a work of careful journalism. Many of the cases he cited had explanations he chose not to include. Some of the ships he described as vanishing without a trace had, in fact, been found. But Berlitz understood something that careful journalists sometimes forget, that mystery is magnetic, and that the unknown has a pull that facts alone cannot always overcome. What he gave the world was not the truth about the Bermuda Triangle. It was something more durable than the truth. He gave the world a story. Chapter 3. Flight 19. If there is one event that sits at the center of the Bermuda Triangle myth, it is the disappearance of Flight 19. On the afternoon of December 5th, 1945, 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale in Florida for a routine training exercise. The mission was a standard navigation run, known as Navigation Problem 1. The planes would fly east, then north, then return to base. Simple, practiced, familiar. The flight leader was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced pilot with over 2,500 hours of flying time. The 13 other men aboard the aircraft were trainees, most of them young, most of them weeks away from the end of their service. What happened next is genuinely difficult to explain, even now. About 90 minutes after takeoff, the control tower at Fort Lauderdale received a transmission from Lieutenant Taylor. He reported that his compass was not working, that he was not sure where he was, and that the ocean looked wrong to him. The transmissions that followed over the next several hours paint a picture of a man who was deeply disoriented, flying in circles, convinced that he had drifted over the Florida Keys, when evidence suggests he had actually drifted over the open Atlantic. Taylor rejected suggestions from ground controllers to turn west, which would almost certainly have brought him back to land. He believed west would take him further out to sea. So he flew north and then northeast, and the transmissions grew weaker and then stopped altogether. All 5 aircraft vanished. 14 men. Not a single piece of confirmed wreckage was ever found from any of the planes. A search and rescue aircraft, a Martin Mariner known as Training 49, was dispatched that same evening with a crew of 13 to search for them. It also disappeared. A ship in the area reported seeing an explosion at the approximate time and location where Training 49 would have been flying. It is believed the Mariner suffered an in-flight explosion, possibly due to a fuel leak. That loss, at least, likely has an answer. The fate of the 5 Avengers does not. Various theories have been put forward over the decades. Taylor may have genuinely confused the Bahamas for the Florida Keys. A navigational error that is understandable but would have sent the formation flying away from the coast rather than toward it. The planes ran out of fuel before anyone could correct the course. The ocean that night was choppy, the swells large, and Avenger aircraft sink very quickly, which might explain why no wreckage was recovered. It is not a supernatural explanation, but it is a deeply human one. Chapter 4. The Ships. Flight 19 is the most famous disappearance in the Triangle. But the sea has its own catalog of losses, and some of them predate the myth by decades. The USS Cyclops was a naval collier, a massive coal-carrying vessel that vanished in March 1918 with 309 people aboard. She was traveling from Barbados to Baltimore. She sent no distress signal. No wreckage was found. No one ever established what happened to her. To this day, the Cyclops represents the single largest loss of life in United States naval history outside of direct combat. There are theories. The ship was overloaded. The captain, a man named George Worley, was known to be erratic and perhaps not entirely stable in his judgment. The cargo may have shifted. There may have been structural failure in the hull. But none of these explanations have ever been confirmed because the ship offered nothing to confirm them. Then there is the Ellen Austin, a story that exists on a slightly different plane of strangeness. In 1881, the Ellen Austin, a British schooner, reportedly came across a derelict vessel floating silently in the Atlantic, somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle region. The ship was in perfect condition. There was food aboard. There were personal effects. There was simply no crew, no sign of struggle. No indication of where they had gone or why. The captain of the Ellen Austin placed a prize crew aboard the derelict, intending to sail both ships to port. The 2 vessels became separated in a fog. When the fog cleared, the derelict was visible on the horizon. But the Ellen Austin's prize crew was gone. The ship was empty again. Whether this story is entirely true is a matter of some historical dispute. The original source material is fragmentary and was heavily embellished over the years as it passed from writer to writer. But the kernel of it, a ship found abandoned at sea with no explanation, is the kind of thing that happens in the ocean more than most people realize. The ocean keeps its reasons. Chapter 5. What the scientists say. Not everyone who has studied the Bermuda Triangle believes it is mysterious. Lawrence David Cush, a librarian and pilot, published a book in 1975 called The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved. His approach was methodical and, frankly, somewhat deflating. He went back to the original sources for every disappearance Charles Berlitz had cited. He read ship logs, weather records, Coast Guard reports, and contemporary newspaper accounts. And what he found, case by case, was that Berlitz had made errors. He had listed ships that sank during storms as having disappeared in calm weather. He had included vessels that sank far outside the Triangle's boundaries. He had described several ships as missing when they had, in fact, been found. Cush's conclusion was that the Bermuda Triangle, as a statistically anomalous zone, simply did not hold up to scrutiny. The rate of disappearances in that area, when accurately measured against the volume of traffic passing through it, was not significantly higher than disappearances anywhere else in the world. The Lloyd's of London insurance market, which has more financial reason than anyone to understand maritime risk, does not charge higher premiums for ships traveling through the Bermuda Triangle. They see no elevated risk there, yet there are real environmental features of that region that make it genuinely hazardous. The Gulf Stream, which moves through the area, is one of the most powerful ocean currents on Earth. It can disperse wreckage across thousands of miles in a matter of days, which would explain why some ships simply leave nothing behind. The Atlantic weather can change violently and without much warning in that part of the ocean. The seafloor is extraordinarily deep in places and shallow in others, with underwater trenches and plateaus that create unusual current patterns. The area contains the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean, a place called the Puerto Rico Trench, where the seafloor sits more than 27,000 feet below the surface. Some researchers have also pointed to methane hydrate deposits on the ocean floor. When these deposits destabilize, they can release massive bubbles of methane gas that would reduce the density of the water to the point where a ship could lose buoyancy and sink almost instantly, too fast for any distress signal. Lab experiments have demonstrated this phenomena at small scale. Whether it has ever actually sunk a vessel in the Bermuda Triangle is unproven. Chapter 6. The Compass and the Current. There is one scientific peculiarity about the Bermuda Triangle that is real and documented, and that has quietly fueled a lot of the stranger theories over the years. The Bermuda Triangle is one of only two places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align. In most parts of the world, a compass needle points toward magnetic north, which is slightly offset from the geographic North Pole. Navigators account for this difference. It's called magnetic declination in their calculations. But in the Bermuda Triangle, and at a corresponding point on the other side of the globe near Japan, the two norths converge, and a compass points true north without correction. This sounds like it should simplify navigation. In theory, it does. But historically, sailors and pilots who did not know about the convergence and applied their normal declination corrections would have introduced a systematic error into their navigation. Not a dramatic one. Not enough to send a ship hundreds of miles off course on its own, but enough to compound other errors. And in uncertain weather over open ocean, compounding errors are exactly the kind of thing that ends in silence. There is also a long tradition of reported instrument malfunctions in the area. Pilots describe compasses spinning, radios cutting out, electronic systems behaving as though something is interfering with them. The prevailing scientific view is that these reports are consistent with normal atmospheric interference, which is common over tropical ocean regions. But they have fed decades of speculation about magnetic anomalies, about energy fields, about things beneath the water that we do not understand. Chapter 7. The Deeper Theories. We should spend a moment with the wilder end of the theoretical spectrum. Not because these theories deserve equal weight with the scientific ones, but because they are part of the history of this place. And they tell us something true about human nature, even when they are almost certainly wrong. The lost continent of Atlantis has been connected to the Bermuda Triangle for as long as people have written about both. The philosopher Plato described Atlantis as a great civilization that sank beneath the ocean in a single day, somewhere in the Atlantic. No serious archaeologist believes Atlantis was a real place in any literal sense. But in 1968, a diver named J. Manson Valentine discovered a formation of large, flat limestone blocks on the seafloor near Bimini in the Bahamas, within the triangle's boundaries. The formation has since been called the Bimini Road. Valentine believed it was a man-made structure, possibly the remains of an ancient road or pier. Geologists have generally concluded it is a natural formation created by wave erosion. The debate about its origin though resolved in the minds of most scientists, has never entirely gone away. The alien abduction theory needs little elaboration. It was popularized by Berlitz and has since become part of the pop culture mythology of the Triangle. The idea is that whatever is taking the ships and the planes is not of this world. There is, to say the obvious, no evidence for this, but in a place where the explanations feel incomplete, the imagination will fill the empty space with whatever it finds most compelling. A more sober French theory involves the idea of a time slip or a temporal anomaly, some distortion of space-time that sends vessels not to the ocean floor, but to somewhere else entirely. This idea is impossible to test or falsify, which is partly what keeps it alive. Chapter 8. The Ones We Remember. On this channel, we like to talk about the human element in these stories, and so, before we close, it seems important to remember that behind every notation in a maritime record, behind every entry in a naval log marked missing, fate, unknown, there was a person. There was someone who kissed a spouse or a parent goodbye before boarding. Someone who had a plan for the following week, a letter they were meaning to write, a photograph in their pocket. The ocean does not distinguish between the mundane and the extraordinary. It takes what it takes without explanation and without ceremony. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight leader of Flight 19, was absolved of responsibility for the disappearance by a Naval Board of Inquiry in 1947. Their initial finding of pilot error was reversed at the request of his mother. His family spent years defending his name. He was only 28 years old when he flew his last flight. The 309 men aboard the USS Cyclops ranged in rank from Captain Worley to the most junior enlisted sailors. Their names are recorded. Their faces, in some cases, survive in photographs. Sibley did not arrive. That is the thing about the Bermuda Triangle that no skeptical analysis quite dispels. The rationalist explanations are almost certainly correct, okay? The statistics are almost certainly unremarkable, hey? And yet the names of the lost are very real, and the water that holds them is very deep, and the silence where their answers should be has a particular quality to it. It is the silence of the sea at night, which is to say, it is not entirely silent at all. Chapter 9. What Remains. The Bermuda Triangle has not stopped claiming headlines in the modern era, though the nature of the disappearances has changed, okay? Better navigation technology, better weather forecasting, better communication systems mean that vessels crossing the region today rarely vanish without at least a partial record. But the mystery has not been definitively closed. It has simply gone quieter. In 2015, the cargo ship El Faro sank in the Triangle region during a hurricane, killing all 33 people aboard. The ship's voyage data recorder was eventually recovered from the seafloor nearly 15,000 feet down. Told a story of cascading mechanical failures and a series of decisions made under pressure by a captain trying to hold the situation together until it was no longer holdable. It was a tragedy. It was not inexplicable, but it was a reminder that the ocean in that region remains precisely as dangerous as it has always been. The mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is not really a mystery of the supernatural. It is a mystery of scale. The ocean is enormous and deep and indifferent, and it has been absorbing human ambition and human error for as long as humans have crossed it. The Triangle is the name we gave to our discomfort with that fact, and there is something almost comforting in that. Once you sit with it long enough, the ocean is not malevolent. It is simply vast, and vastness does not owe us simple explanations. The water keeps what it takes. The names endure. And the triangle of sea between Miami and Bermuda and Puerto Rico moves on its tides tonight, just as it always has. Neither threatening nor welcoming, holding its silence as the oldest places always do.